there could easily be a 40% drop in the value of commercial real estate. The regional banks in particular, about 70% of commercial real estate loans are in the regional banks. So we have a perfect storm for the financial system.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for May 16th through May 23rd, 2023, while supplies last. This week we feature the silver Krugerrand at $3.99 over spot. For years, the Krugerrand was the most known bullion coin in the world, and in 2017, the South African Mint and Rand Refinery began minting a silver counterpart to the famed gold Krugerrand. The silver Krugerrand bear the springbok antelope on one side and the portrait of Paul Kruger on the other, and have a face value of 1 rand. They come 25 to a tube, 500 to a monster box, they are IRA eligible and are renowned for recognizability and design. Best of all, they are only $3.99 over spot while supplies last. To order this special or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Bob Moriarty, Marine, naval aviator, and financial author, also founder of 321gold.com and 321energy.com. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's great to have you. Our viewers always enjoy having you on. We had our viewers submit some questions, and so many of them were saying, Bob's our favorite guest. We always enjoy having him on. So we'll just dive right in here. We have 2 topics to cover today, and then we'll get to viewers' questions. One of the pressing issues right now is the commercial real estate market. Really, since COVID, when everyone kind of went home, a lot of people haven't gone back to work. So there's a lot of empty buildings out there, and that could put pressure on the whole financial system. What do you make of the current situation right now?
Well, there's 2 issues, and you've touched on part of it, but the other is the interest rate increase, which is the fastest interest rate increase in history, and that makes a lot of these loans unaffordable. And obviously, the banking system is under stress, and we've had more banks go under than we did in 2008. So they're tightening up their standards, and I'm seeing indications that there could easily be a 40% drop in the value of commercial real estate. Now, given that the banks are getting hit about 10 different ways, they're getting hit on they have to increase the interest rates they pay. There's lots of bad loans. Their assets in the form of bonds of other banks or U.S. government bonds have gone down about 30% in value, and now commercial real estate is crashing. And the regional banks in particular, about 70% of commercial real estate loans are in the regional banks. So we have a perfect storm for the financial system. And the really scary thing is, by and large, the money stays in the banking system. If you go down to your bank and you take out $500,000, you don't shove it under your mattress. You put it in another bank. But what's happening is $1 trillion sloshing back and forth between banks. So it's a very difficult time to be a banker.
And could you expand on how this could impact the banking system? We've already been, you and I have obviously been keeping track of this ongoing banking crisis, but if a lot of these loans, if the commercial real estate goes down by 40%, that has to have a negative impact on the banking system.
Yeah, of course, it's catastrophic. And the real key is here, it's not just the banking system, it's the entire financial system. Banks and insurance companies and hedge funds are all in the same boat. If the boat sinks, they all sink. It's catastrophic. We've just barely started the crash, and it's going to get worse.
I remember I was just interviewing, this was just yesterday, Michael Pinto, and he mentioned that the Fed stopped raising rates back in 2006, and it took about a whole year until we really started seeing cracks in the system. This time, it seems like there can be a delay, but we're already seeing issues, and really the bottom could come out, in the next year or so. The Fed has already done a lot of damage by raising rates so fast.
Well, no. They did the damage by lowering interest rates to near zero back in 2008. And that was the equivalent of pulling the pin on a hand grenade. Now, it's taken it till now for the hand grenade to go off, but this wasn't caused by raising the interest rates. It was caused by lowering the interest rates to near zero and then raising the interest rates at the highest possible rate. And I just saw something. I wish I could bring it up. I don't think I could find it. The money supply is going down faster than it has since 1930. And the money supply, of course, is what keeps the economy humming. So even though they're raising interest rates, the money supply is plummeting at the same time. And that virtually guarantees a hard landing. And the real key is, and people don't understand this, the Fed has been doing QT, quantitative tightening, for over a year now. But when the banks started failing, they flushed so much money into the system that was exactly the opposite of tightening. So we went back to QE and people didn't even know it. But we've got a perfect situation. The Fed has mousetrapped themselves, and there is nothing they can do that's the right thing to do. It's only the least bad thing is what we can hope for.
It does seem like they've trapped themselves. As we've discussed before, if they raise rates, they crash the economy. If they lower rates, we continue to see extremely high inflation. I did want to discuss the second topic we were hoping to talk about today. And this is something that we've discussed before, a debt jubilee. That's really the only solution out there. And this was actually kind of standard practice a few thousand years ago. I know Michael Hudson, you've been looking at his work quite in detail, and he recently wrote a book about this and going over how what we're seeing today is in some way rhymes with what we saw back in Rome, which is they kind of abandoned the debt jubilee and started seeing how people who took out money, they became slaves, right? They became debt slaves. Can you expand kind of on the history of this and how what we're seeing today mirrors what we saw in Rome?
Well, the real key is that life is cyclical, and you keep doing the same thing again and again and again, and the only thing that changes is how you react to it. The key to understanding debt is all debt gets paid. It gets paid either by the borrower or it gets paid by the lender. Now, in pre-Greek Roman times, in Babylonia and the central Middle East, when the debts got too high, the ruler would declare a debt jubilee, and all the debts would be wiped out. And the key was they didn't want to destroy their economy by destroying the people who were producing the food and the agriculture. And it was a good system. It worked, and it was actually mentioned in the Bible, and it was used in the Jewish religion until about 2,600 years ago. When we got into Greek and Roman times, there was a total change, and instead of the creditors being required to pay the debt, the debtors had to pay the debt. And what happened was the debts increased and increased and increased and increased, and the oligarchs demanded they get paid, and literally people got run off their farms, literally run out of Rome, and it caused 1,000-year dark ages. As a result, turned everybody into debt slaves. Now, the one thing that nobody talks about, but everybody understands, is we have more debt in the world today than we have ever had before in history. You have two choices. You could take the choice of forcing people to pay the debt that they can't afford to pay and giving up all the collateral. The debtors, on the other hand, recognize that the terms just simply don't make any sense. We had an interesting situation in 2008 where the hedge funds had gone deeply into debt, and either the hedge funds went under or they got bailed out. And what happened was they got bailed out. And of course, all of the debts that they had incurred, and all of the debts the banks incurred were transferred to the backs of the taxpayers. That's what the oligarchs always try to do, and it's a great way of causing a revolution. Now, let me point something out. I don't think we've discussed this before, but we need to. How many mass shootings have there been since the first of this year? Okay, over 2 a day. Now, a mass shooting in the United States is defined as something involving 4 or more people being shot. Now, if you go back to when I was a kid, and this is 50 or 60 years ago, I can't tell you. I never heard of a mass shooting. Okay, and we're having 2 a day now, and people are being shot for absolutely absurd reasons. A kid goes up to the wrong house to pick up his brothers at night, and the guy living in the house sees a black guy at the door, and he shoots him. Okay, some young girls pull into the wrong driveway and realize they're in the wrong driveway, and they start to back out, and the homeowner shoots them. Crime in the United States is totally out of control, and we're on the verge of either a civil war or a revolution.
Now, we do have viewers' questions here. One kind of on this same topic, the collapse of the system. This viewer wants to know about Europe and the US. Which do you think will fall first?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. Okay, first of all, Europe is in far worse shape financially than the United States is. As bad as the United States is, it's far worse in Europe. Greece is bankrupt. Italy is bankrupt. The Ukraine war has just jacked the price of energy up in Europe like crazy. And you've got a situation where you've got 10 or 15% real inflation, and wages are not keeping up with that. So in Europe, people are very angry as well. They're just not as well armed as Americans are. Which one will collapse first? I don't know. Flip a coin. I'm not sure it makes any difference.
As we've talked before, it seems like the system is so interconnected nowadays that, as you mentioned, it may not make too much of a difference, because if one financial system collapses, it can often spread to the other one.
Well, I mean, we can count on that. Here's a better way of putting it. Let's say the European banking system collapses next Friday at 6 o'clock. Well, on Monday at 8 o'clock, the U.S. banking system will collapse. We are intertwined, and that's a very important point. The biggest financial bubble in history was the Kuwaiti stock market in 1989, but it was a localized bubble, and it only affected people in Kuwait. The U.S. dollar has transmitted this particular debt disease all over the world. 20 years ago, people in Europe didn't use credit cards. Okay, in France, people still use checks. But now everybody's got credit cards, everybody's got debit cards, and it's not going to take very much to crash the system. And as soon as it goes in one country, it's going to go in all of them.
Now, when it comes to the solution, it seems like the elite want to push this central bank digital currency as the solution, which really won't solve anything. It seems like it'll make things worse and take away people's privacy and freedom. There, we have a viewer's question: how long will it take to totally implement CBDC with social credit? So obviously China has been experimenting with this social credit system, and it's in the realm of speculation right now of could central bank digital currency be linked to that, but it seems like it's definitely a possibility out there. So do you think that'll be implemented, and how long do you think it would take?
They're going to try to. And I am working on a book now, and that's going to be one of the chapters in the book is central bank digital currencies. And here's what to think about. I can prove to you with a couple of questions that it's not the individuals, it's not the citizens that start wars or cause collapses or financial calamities. It's always government. And by and large, and I like Europe for this reason, they don't particularly trust their government. It's amazing how much Americans trust government when there's every reason to not trust government. And Americans just frankly have too much fluoride in the toothpaste, and they've been dumbed down to the point something extraordinary comes out like the Durham report, and the mainstream media doesn't even cover it. Congress tries to investigate Biden for taking a bribe from a Romanian businessman. The mainstream media totally ignored it. We're being lied to about everything. I think there's going to be a counter trend move to more freedom. And actually, this is predicted in the fourth turning. In the fourth turning, they said you're going to have a crisis that's going to start about 2005 and last 20 years or so. But they said the tendency will try to be a totalitarian government. However, people will start standing up and saying, we're against this. I don't think central bank digital currencies will work. And I think that would be the equivalent of releasing the spoon on a hand grenade. People are angry now. And when they realize that who they should be angry at is not the blacks, it's not the whites, it's not the transgenders, it's the government. And they're going to start demanding some real leadership in government, and I think that's wonderful.
You mentioned how Europe, obviously, people are less trusting in government there. People are looking to prepare themselves to prepare themselves so they continue to live in, financial freedom. A lot of people are considering moving out of the country. And I know that's something that you did to move to France there. This viewer wants to know, please comment on what you consider to be the biggest mistakes to avoid for those considering expatriation.
I'm not going to pick the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake is not to leave. If you go back to Greek and Roman times, when times got tough, the smart people said, I'm out of here. Okay, anybody who would put up with the crime in the United States today is just totally nuts. I mean, the United States is out of control. Totally out of control. And I don't see that getting better anytime soon. I see that getting far worse. And again, there are 399 million guns in the United States. There's, I think, 330 million Americans in the United States. There's 10 million illegal immigrants just in the last year. I mean, we're just set up for total chaos in the United States. If you have ever considered living somewhere else, this would be a good time. And depending on your economic situation, there's a lot of people who have retired and gone to Mexico, and they're quite happy there, gone to Central America or to Panama. I can't say what people should do because there's too many possible alternatives. However, the United States right now is a madhouse. Some of that stuff about the FBI and the CIA and the Durham report and Clinton and the election in Arizona just frankly terrifies me. I wouldn't put up with it, and I didn't put up with it.
We do have some viewers' questions on precious metals. The first one is from Nick, and he's wanting to know, last time you commented that it's not a good idea to go all in on precious metals. And obviously there's a caveat here that nothing on the show is financial advice, and neither of us can offer financial advice. But you mentioned kind of giving the analogy that, well, precious metals is insurance, and you can't put you shouldn't put a $4 million insurance policy on a $400,000 house. That just doesn't make sense. He's wanting if you can expand on this, because he says, what does this mean in these times when people are talking about absolute chaos? And where else should people put their funds? I think one of the things that came to my mind when you said that was that for an insurance policy, if your house burns down on a $400,000 house, you're not going to get that $4 million. So obviously it doesn't make sense. But if the financial system collapses and you have all your funds in precious metals, those precious metals that you have are probably going to purchase a whole lot more than they did before. So overall, you're going to gain even on, maybe the excess metals that you have. But your perspective on that, if you can kind of expand on your point that you made on the previous interview.
Okay, here's what I do. I separate resource investing into two different categories. One, and I'm absolute, nobody's ever going to change my point of view with this, is gold, silver, and platinum and palladium are insurance policies against financial chaos. And likewise, and you just raised a good point, you don't put a $4 million insurance on a $400,000 house. You don't put $200,000 worth of insurance on a $10,000 car. You need enough physical gold and silver to make it through 6 months or a year. And yes, the value will be far higher, not because the metals have gone up, because the currencies are going to collapse. We're going to have a total collapse in belief in the good sense of government. But the key is this happened thousands of times before. It's no big deal. We will make it through this. And I actually believe, I'm very positive, I think a lot of good things are going to happen because we're going to wake up. The United States right now is a sick society. We've got a Supreme Court justice that can't define what it's like to be a woman. We've got a 6'4" male swimming against young girls, okay? And they have to change in the same locker room. Now, I'm sorry, that's sick, okay? That's just perverted. It's just wrong. And we need to regain some kind of sense of reality, which we don't have. However, once you've got the insurance policy, hopefully you've still got some money. And I think that you should put that into some kind of resources. And that isn't necessarily precious metals, but farmland would certainly qualify. Other natural resources, food, water. We're going to have a dichotomy. We're going to have a split between paper assets and real assets. And during the Depression, paper assets disappear. And during the Depression, real assets increase in value. So you want to be investing in real things, not in paper things. And some people get confused. They say, well, share certificates are paper. Well, they are, but they're fractional ownership of real assets. So while I do have a substantial amount in physical precious metals, I invest in a lot of resource stocks, and I'm quite happy to do that. What I wouldn't invest in is T-bills or T-bonds or CDS or bank loans. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Yeah, definitely. And on that same line of thinking for the insurance, we have two viewers actually asking what your favorite coin is. And also the second viewer is, what is your favorite form to stack silver in? Coins, kilos, 10 ounce, 100 ounce bars?
I'll attack the silver question first. If silver goes to the moon, you want to be in the biggest bars you can have because people will pay a premium for it, and that would be 1,000-ounce bars. However, for day-to-day living, junk silver, pre-1965 junk silver, is a known quality and will be accepted faster than anything else. So I actually have some junk silver and I have some 1,000-ounce bars. As far as gold's concerned, and this has to do with my wife being British and me living in France. In the UK, and I really like this law, if you buy British sovereigns, you pay no duty or taxes buying it, and you pay no duty or taxes when you sell it. And that's really kind of cool. In France, you can buy gold coins that used to be valid, and that would be German marks, and that would be French francs, and that would be English sovereigns. You don't pay any tax buying it, but you do have to pay an 8% tax when you sell it. If you're buying gold, you want the smallest quantity, not the smallest quantity, the smallest size coins that you would have, and I consider a sovereign or US $5 gold piece or a French 20 franc coin. 20 franc coins, there's 5 to 1 ounce. And sovereigns, $5 gold pieces, there's about 4 to 1 ounce.
One thing I wanted clarification on, you said that the the bigger size bars you think will have a higher premium in the future? Because I know at the moment it's the reverse. So typically the smaller sizes on the buy and sell side have higher premiums right now.
Yeah, and you just raised a good point. I always buy what it's the cheapest to buy. And if you go back 20 years ago, I bought several $1,000s of World War II silver nickels, okay? Because I could buy them about 50% of the value of the silver in them. But I was able to buy junk silver at 80 or 85% of the silver. And I consider that a good deal. Now, if you buy a 1,000-ounce bar, you won't pay any premium whatsoever. And I think that's a good deal.
All right. Well, Bob, we really appreciate all your time today and insights. Before we let you go, where can our viewers find you online? And do you have any last thoughts for our viewers?
They can find me at 321 Gold or 321 Energy or YouTube. I mean, I've done dozens or hundreds of interviews, and I certainly would encourage people to go to Amazon and take a look at the books. I'll say something that I would love to have somebody actually force the question. I don't care what you read of the dozen or so books that I've written. There is something for everybody in there, and some of it's very funny. I happen to be a very funny writer.
Fantastic. And we do have one last viewer's question here. Thank you for inviting Bob again. Here's our favorite. Could you please ask Bob for a story about his chickens and his dog? So maybe there's a story with both of them, but pick either one this time.
Well, I've got to give you the background. I was raised in a family with 6 kids, and this was in the 40s and 50s, and we were poor. And we didn't have money for dog food or cat food or bird food or fish food, even though I'm told fish don't eat that much. We didn't have spare cash. So we never had pets. I've never had a pet before my entire life. And somebody came up about 6 months ago and said, you should get a dog. So I got a dog, and the dog's name is Fax, F-A-X. And he's a French dog, so he speaks perfect French and English. But what I didn't realize is border collies have a sense of humor. Nobody has ever suggested this to me. It would never occur to me that a dog would have a sense of humor. But Fax has me trained, and I will sleep with my elbow over the side of the bed. And sometime between 7 or 8 in the morning, he comes over and he starts nudging my elbow. And there's two purposes to that. One is to wake me up so I can take him outside. And the other is he's saying, I'd like to have a head scratch. So I give him about 5 minutes of a head scratch, and I put some clothes on it. I take him out for a walk. Even though I walk, he runs. But I learned last week that Fax has a sense of humor, because I was asleep soundly, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he came over and he started nudging my elbow. And I'm looking down at him and said, what's the matter? Your watch broken? And he kept nudging my elbow. And I thought, he could be trying to tell me it's time to go outside. And luckily, all the hens were in bed, so I could let him out in the yard. So I went to the door, opened the door, and let him out in the yard. And because I've made it clear to him that he is not to eat the chickens, he's actually afraid of going out in the yard. So he looked at me for 5 minutes, and I looked at him for 5 minutes, and he didn't do anything. So I went back to bed. And sure enough, he started nudging my arm again. So I opened the door to the barn, and I actually let him out into my parking lot where I parked my car, and then he can do whatever he needs to do. So I opened the barn door. He looked at me for 5 minutes. I looked at him for 5 minutes. And it was clear that he thought that I was going to walk him at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's out of the question. So I went back inside, laid back, went to bed, went to sleep. I got up the next morning and I realized why he had been so eager to go outside. Clearly, I had been giving him too much people food, and his stomach was upset. And he had diarrhea. And he was kind enough to tell me, hey, Dad, I need to go outside and, do my job. And I ignored him. But I will say he absolutely has a sense of humor, because he forgave me for not taking him for a walk. And he did his job on this $2 IKEA cotton rug, which is about 2 feet by 2 feet. It's really wonderful because I could drag it outside and wash it off. And I was washing it off, and he was just looking at me, smiling. He had a big grin on his face, saying, next time I wake you at 3 o'clock in the morning, are you going to pay some attention to me then? And I think I'll take him for a walk next time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for that story. And thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Okay, and you have a good weekend. Thank you.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.